Baseball ASMR. Welcome to Baseball ASMR, a channel where we talk about baseball in a relaxing way. Today, by popular demand, I thought I'd go over some more baseball rules, concepts, strategies, ideas, just more about the basics of the game. It seems like in the past month, this first installment in this, series now did quite well and attracted a lot of new viewers. So welcome and welcome back. And a lot of people were requesting more info about the game's basics and rules and such. So I figured I would do a little bit more on that today. The first time I really just did the very basics of like field dimension and, how to get a hit or a strike, all those sorts of very simple things. Very simple to me because I've known this game forever, and to Americans, I think most of us could explain the game reasonably well. But if you didn't grow up with it, like many non-Americans, it's probably very puzzling, similar to how I know nothing about cricket, and if I had to watch a game of cricket, I think I'd be very lost. Let's dive in here. So today I'll go over some more basic concepts for offense and defense, some basic like roster construction of how teams are built and like what kind of players do what. And that is for defense and the lineup, the hitters, and then also for the pitching staff, which is starters and the bullpen, relievers. But we'll get there. First, I realized last time I did not explain the scoreboard, or like how you write out the score, which is different than other sports for like basketball or football, soccer, hockey. It's just, team and their score, how many runs or points they have, and the other team, and then their score. But in baseball, there are three numbers that you put. I will put a graphic up on screen because it's actually better than anything I could draw here, but I'll be doing some whiteboard action in a bit. But for the score, I have this little... This is actually a artist's rendering of the scoreboard at Fenway Park, which is where the Boston Red Sox play. They are one of the few manually operated scoreboards left, along with Wrigley Field in Chicago for the Cubs. I think these might be the last two. I'm not sure. It actually was a chapter or a question in my baseball trivia book, but shows you how much I remember. Actually that's out of frame, but I have my two books here just for, fun. So the scoreboard, as you can see, you'll have one team and then the other team below it. And then for each inning, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then they often have a 10th for an extra inning if needed, back when they had manually operated scoreboards. Now, obviously, most scoreboards are digital, so they're a lot more customizable, and they have a lot more information. But, the number next to the NY for New York is the jersey number for the pitcher, and the number next to Boston would be the number for the hitter. Let's say if we're in the bottom of the inning. If it's the reverse, then it would be the reverse. In the top of the inning, it would be the New York batter number and the Boston pitcher number. But like I said, in the modern scoreboards, there's, often video or photos of the batter along with their stats for the season or their career or the postseason, depending what time of year it is, and other pitching info and stuff like that. But basically, so next to you have the number of the player, then the team, and then in the 1, 2, or 3 in the inning column, that's how many runs the team scored that inning. Typically, a 0 is a 0 and a 1 is a 1, but anything over a 1 is what people call a crooked number because, I guess a 1 is a straight number and anything more would be a crooked number. So if a team scores more than one run in an inning, that's considered good, and people sometimes call that a crooked number of runs. That's an old parlance. So yeah, those numbers are all runs, and then the scoreboard, which you will see if you watch a broadcast TV game of baseball, the scoreboard on the right after the white up and down lines, the crossed lines on the right-hand side with the RHE, that is the three numbers we're really concerned with. And that's what you'll see before and after commercial breaks, to just sort of reorient the viewer of what's going on in the game. So as you can see here, in this example, New York has 4 runs, 12 hits, and 1 error, and Boston has 6 runs, 8 hits, and no errors. So the runs is what matters for the score and the outcome of the game. So it looks like this is probably the end of the 10th, since there's a 0 for both teams listed there. So in this example, Boston won 6-4. But the hits are important too. It helps tell the story of the game, because as you can see, New York had more hits with 12, but they scored only 4 runs. So they left a lot of men on base, which is another way of saying they did not convert base runners into runs, which sometimes is an indicator of a bad offense, but it could also be an indicator of a very good pitcher or pitching staff they faced that day. But it's just another data point to kind of evaluate a team. And then the errors are also important. An error, I don't know if I mentioned last time, an error is when a team screws up on defense. They make a bad play. And most teams would have about, over the course of a season, a very good defensive team has about a half of an error or less per game. Bad defensive teams have 1 error per game. So the window there is very small between good and bad. But typically you want your team not to have any errors, or at the most 1. If you have more than 1 or like 4 or 5, that's a very bad defensive game, such as my Yankees had in the World Series this past postseason. They had, I think, it was either 3 or 4 bad plays. I don't know if they were all errors, but everything kind of unraveled in this one inning, and they went from maybe winning a game and going back to LA and having a chance in the World Series to losing at home, and the series was over. So errors are very costly, and they can help decide the outcome of the game, much like in American football, an interception or turnovers, or in basketball, turnovers there or steals. Even though none of those are put on the scoreboard for those sports, in baseball, errors are a very big deal. So they are put along with runs and hits. And that was a very, that's from the very early days of baseball. And, it's a little outdated, but baseball is very rooted in tradition in a way that other sports aren't. Baseball being so old, over 120 years old, it has a lot of inertia in the way things are and keeping things the same. So that's the main part of the scoreboard. And then below you can see at bat is the number of the player again, and then how many balls and strikes for the batter, and then how many outs the team has. And I guess the hit and the error would be for the last batter, of like what happened to the last batter, or maybe, I don't know, or maybe the current play. That's how they would tell the audience, the crowd, how the play was scored. Because after every play, during every game, there is a person called the official scorer, and they score the game, and not just the runs, hits, and errors, but every play on defense and to some extent the offense. They determine what happened officially. So, like, was it a hit or was it an error? It depends on if a ball is batted at a defender, at somebody, and they should have made the play with a reasonable defensive skills, and they did not, then that's an error. But if the hit was, now it's like if the hit is over 100 miles an hour, even if it's right at someone, often it will be scored a hit instead of an error because that's so fast given how far away the fielders are in the infield. That's just one example, but the official score kind of determines what errors are. And I believe teams and players have recourse. They can appeal and have errors changed into hits after the game with the league office, and there's a whole protocol with that, but it doesn't happen too often. Maybe people will argue or complain during the game, but they're more often they're more likely to argue with the umpire than the official scorer, who is some nameless, faceless person not on the field. So that is the one last note is that I mentioned the errors. Like most teams, if they have close to one a game, that's really bad, and if they have half of an error per game over this season, that's pretty good. For just as a benchmark for runs, a very good offensive team is close to 5 a game. Like this past season, I think the Dodgers had over 5, and bad teams are 3 or under. So the Chicago White Sox were last with, I think, 3.1. So that window between bad and good is a little bit bigger than the errors window. But again, it's a game of inches, like Al Pacino said in Any Given Sunday about football, but it applies to baseball as well. The margin between bad and good is quite slim. So that's the ins and outs of the scoreboard and what you'll see on screen if you watch a game. For the score, they'll usually have like the inning and then the score for each team, and maybe if they're going to a commercial break, they'll show the next 3 batters that are coming up next inning, or if they're going out into a commercial break, they'll show a pitching change, or whatever the pitcher who's coming off, whoever made a good defensive play to end the inning. Next, I thought we'd do the rosters. We'll go to whiteboard action for here. There is a 26-man and a 40-man. Now, we'll start with the 26-man because that is the official, like, major league active roster. That's how many players per team they're allowed to have in the major leagues at any given time, and it's 13 pitchers max. Now, this is done because pitching puts a lot of strain on the arm. Separate issue. A lot of pitchers, more and more over the past 5-10 years, have been having more and more severe injuries to their arms and shoulders and such. So pitching is very hard on the arm, especially now with people throwing harder than ever. So the likelihood of injury is higher. So if there was no roster maximum for pitchers or minor league rules for up-downs, or not up-downs, but being sent down or up from the minors to the majors, if those rules were not in place, teams would simply just shuffle through guys and then send them to the minors and then bring up another fresh arm just to get through it. But having this maximum number makes teams be more creative and have to actually work to manage their roster. And so 13 pitchers max. We'll get into batters and hitters versus pitchers later, but this is just general now. This expands to 28 in September, and this is done because it's later in the season and people are worn down. Even if they haven't been hurt, even if they haven't been injured, they've been hurt. Is, I guess, how people in sports refer to it. Injured is when you're on the injured list, but everyone gets hurt at some point. If a ball takes a bad hop and hits you in the arm, you'll have a bruise for a few days or a week, stuff like that, but you don't go on the injured list, you keep playing. So by the end of the season in September, before the playoffs, a lot of players are beat up, so they get 2 more players for that month. And teams often also use the extra roster space to do what's called a September call-up, which is when either they're out of the playoff race or they are in it and they think they have a really good young player in the minors that could help. They will call up a player from the minors and they can be on the roster and help out and just supplement everything. So either it's a good team and they're calling up a player to help because they think they can help and they've been proving themselves all year in the minors, or if the team is out of contention, they will call up players to see, can they handle major league pitching, or we think they're going to be really good in a few years, but let's just get them a taste of what it's like to be in the majors because the conditions are different and the pitches are a lot harder to hit, or batters are a lot harder to get out if they're a pitcher, yada, yada, yada. So the September call-up is a period in the season that has to do with rosters and helps teams. And then for double headers, they get an extra guy just for the day because, well, first of all, if I haven't explained, I think I did in the other MLB overview video, but maybe I didn't. A doubleheader is when a team plays 2 games in one day, and it's particularly hard on catchers, but other position players as well. They're, playing 9 innings of baseball takes a toll on your body, especially when you're playing 5 to 6 to 7 games a week. And, teams often have stretches of like 15 games in a row without any days off. So if you have a doubleheader, then you get an extra guy just for the day, and teams will usually call someone up from the minors to help out. Sometimes a pitcher, sometimes a catcher, depends, but they have to be on the 40-man already, which I'll get to in a sec, but you can't just call up someone else. They have to be on the 40-man. But it helps with the wear and tear of your players. And by the way, there used to be a lot more doubleheaders back in the day. Players used to play a lot more, and players used to pitch and catch, or pitch and field, and hit and do all sorts of things. But now players are a lot more specialized and only do basically one thing. If they pitch, they don't hit, and vice versa. So the wear and for good reason, because the game has gotten harder, and everyone, all the pitchers throw harder, and the hitters hit harder, and everybody weight trains. It's so different than 100 years ago. So doubleheaders aren't really scheduled anymore. They typically happen when there's a rainout and a game needs to be rescheduled, because it's hard to have the same 2 teams in the same place again. Or you can make it up at the other team's ballpark if those teams are meeting again later in the season, or if they're coming back. There's a lot of variables, but so doubleheaders, you get an extra guy. And then, by the way, when you have 28, it's 14 max pitchers. Just as a heads up, they just up the maximum rules. You can't just add 2 pitchers. You can only add 1 if you're adding 2 players to get to 28 in September. And then two-way players. Like I was just saying, back in the day, players used to be two-way players. They would pitch and hit, but now that's not very common, except for basically the only guy who does it right now is Shohei Ohtani, who's a very good player for the Dodgers. And he pitches and hits, although last year he was hurt, so he didn't pitch. But two-way players count as 1 player for the roster, not 2. So there's an advantage to having these guys. But, it's very hard to pitch and hit at the major league level. So, like I said, there's only 1 guy right now who does it. But he only takes up 1 roster spot, but he does 2 things. So it's a very big advantage for that team. Okay, that was a 26-man roster, and now we go to the 40-man. This includes the 26-man players plus minor leaguers. But it's not all minor leaguers, because you have 3 levels. I don't know the roster sizes offhand, but having 3 levels, let's say they're 26 or more each, that would be, at least 70 more players total. So obviously it's the 26-man. I'm sorry, it's not minor leaguers. I always get that confused. So the 40-man roster is the 26-man roster plus all the guys on the injured list. There's the 7, 10, and 15-day injured lists, depending on timing of injuries and stuff. There's also a 60-day injured list. I don't know how that works offhand, but so 26-man plus the injured list players, plus, players that are getting special leave, paternity leave. maternity leave, bereavement, and medical leave. And then, okay, so I was right. And then some minor leaguers. So yeah, and then if someone gets called up and they're not on the 40-man, someone has to come off. So, that's why, so like 26-man plus all these players who are, having a baby or are sick, or their wife, their father is sick or just passed away or whatever, plus a few minor leaguers. The minor leaguers that you put on the 40-man are the ones that you are most likely to bring up, usually, because that makes it easier. If they're not on the 40-man, then you have to, basically let a player go for free, for nothing. So it's kind of a big deal. This roster stuff is kind of a big deal for how teams play the game and approach the games in between games. All right, enough of rosters. So that's that stuff. We'll go to the pitching staff next. This is more fun. So you got your starters. These are the best pitchers usually on staff other than your closer. And most teams use 5. So these guys will start the game. They will pitch, well, here, we'll let this go. They will pitch 5 to 7 innings per game. They will try to pitch most of the game because games are 9 innings. And then after them, the relievers will come in. 5 or 7 innings, 100 pitches per game. These are your best pitchers, so you want them to go the most in the game because they have the best stuff, as it's called, the best pitches. And then, so then throughout the season, you want them to have, this is a rough estimate, between 100 and 200 innings pitched. Oh, you can't see that, so I'll move this up a little bit. 200 innings pitched used to be a really good mark for a good pitcher. Like, hey, they really contributed to their season. But it's increasingly rare. I don't know if even one pitcher did that last season because pitchers are taken out before the 3rd time through the order. So I'll get to that in a bit. But, each time they go through all 9 hitters, that's called going through the order. I guess I'll just do it now. But so if a pitcher faces all 9 batters, it usually, the minimum it can take is 3 innings because there's 3 outs per inning, so per half inning. Every time they go through the order, the opponent team's batting average goes up. They find it easier to face the pitcher the more they see his pitches. So the 2nd time through the order, the batting average goes up, and the 3rd time it goes up a lot more. So increasingly, teams have been only going through the order, only having pitchers go through the order twice, maybe 3 times, and then they pull them and put in relievers. So they're no longer doing 200 as much. They'll go closer to 100 innings pitched. But, if you do the math, you have 162 games times at least 9 innings. So you have at least 1,458 innings per season that you have to cover with all your pitchers. And it's usually more because there are extra innings and such. So, and that doesn't even include the postseason. So you have a lot of innings that you have to have pitchers get through. So it's a delicate balance of, worrying about pitcher health and getting through the season and all sorts of different things. And then, of course, your really good pitchers, they may have a little chip on their shoulder or not want to come out, so you give them a little more leash, even if you wouldn't normally if they were someone else. So, but yeah, you have a lot of innings to get through. Even if your 5 starters pitch 200 innings each, that would only be 1,000. So you'd still have 400 something to get through with your relievers and spot starters, who are guys that will come and start every now and then from the minors to help out, but aren't regulars. But yeah, so the pitching staff, this is the starters are your best pitchers. So they take up 5 of the 13 maximum pitcher slots. I will also add a caveat that sometimes teams do a 6-man starting rotation, but it's actually kind of rare. It's increasingly common over the past 5-10 years, but it's still the vast minority of teams that do this. So the reason you would have a 6-man rotation is because, say, your number 1 and 2 starters, your best 2, aren't as good as other number 1 and 2 starters, or your whole staff isn't that good, or the more increasingly common reason is one or more of your starters are Asian, from the Asian leagues in Korea or Japan, and those pitchers are used to a 6-man rotation. They only pitch once a week, and they pitch less. So by having 6 starters instead of 5, you lessen the burden on each one of the pitchers because they don't pitch as often and they don't pitch as much overall throughout the season. But it's not as common. It's really only for teams who don't have as good of pitchers or have Asian pitchers who are used to it. Or, sorry, I forgot. The other reason would be if you have pitchers coming back from injury and they're on an innings limit, and you don't want them to go as much because you're afraid they'll get hurt again, or you want them to come back slowly. So there's a couple of reasons to do it, but most pitching staffs have 5 starters, and that leaves 8 slots for your bullpen, which we'll discuss now. I hope you're enjoying these videos. As always, like and subscribe, and feel free to comment if you like anything or have any suggestions. You can leave video ideas. I'm still taking suggestions if you wish. Yeah, so this is one that was on my list to do, this video that I'm doing right now, but wasn't at the top. But because so many people requested it, it has moved up the food chain. So here we are. So before the bullpen, just 2 more quick notes. There are openers who are pitchers that start the game, but they're not starters. Technically they start the game, so you can call them a starter, but an opener is different because they only go 1 inning or 1 time through the rotation, because they're good enough to do that, which 1 time through can take 3 innings, but or 2 innings or whatever, something like that. They don't go as far as starters, but they don't. Yeah, so they have stuff that's good enough to get through 1 time through the order, but not enough to go deep into the game. And then they will be followed by a bulk guy who goes, 3 to 5 innings, and then relievers after that. That's one strategy, and it's because, again, if you don't have very strong starters, you kind of have to get creative in how you approach games. And then the last little wonky thing about pitchers is position players. So these are like catcher, outfielder, infielder. Position players are allowed to pitch only if you're down by, if you're up or down by 6 or more runs. So more than 6 runs, 6 plus runs. So, sometimes it's funny. Your first baseman will come in, and back in high school, they used to be a pitcher. So they're not very good, but they have a couple pitches and they go slow. And usually it's a fun time because the game is already decided. But position players can pitch in certain instances. And basically it's because they want teams to be competitive if they're within striking distance of, 4 or 5 runs or whatever. But that's 2 more caveats there. And now we will get to the bullpen, or as some call it, the bully. You'll find in baseball a lot of times nicknames are given just by adding a Y on the end of a name. Baseball players are not the most creative bunch. So, Aaron Judge is Judgy. Brett Gardner is Gardy. Yeah, so a Y would go at a lot of last names if they don't already have a nickname. But anyway, so the bully is a nickname for the bullpen. Typically 8 pitchers, like I said, because 5 starters from the 13 max pitchers leaves you 8. And then so you have different kinds of relievers. These are relief pitchers or relievers that are in the bullpen because they come in to relieve the starter. And there's different kinds for different situations. The overall idea is leverage. It's high, medium, low. So that's the modern approach to the bullpen. High leverage means that it's a situation in the game that is very crucial to the outcome. So, the other team has the bases loaded and no outs, or their best hitter is up and he already hit 2 home runs, and they're down by 1. Things like that is high leverage situations. So you put in your best relievers or your second best, depending on a lot of factors. And then medium is like when you're up by 1 or 2 or 3, when there's no one on, things like that. And then low leverage is the game has been decided and you just need to finish the game, and you put in the guys that aren't necessarily as good. So, teams will approach it this way more these days, with your best pitchers in the bullpen being high leverage guys, and then, going from there. But I'll go through the traditional way of building a bullpen. You have your closer, and he's your number 1 guy in the bullpen. He is the guy that comes in at the end of the game. So for the Yankees in the 90s and 2000s, that was Mariano or Mo Rivera. He's your best pitcher in the bullpen, and maybe even the best pitcher on your pitching staff. He might have better pitches than your starters, but he doesn't have the stamina to go many innings. So, or, you value his pitch mix or his ability to perform in the clutch or high leverage situations, that you make him the closer rather than as a starter. So the closer is the guy who ends the game, typically comes in the 9th inning to get 3 outs, sometimes more, sometimes the 8th inning for 5 to 6 outs, but that's more rare. They are the best. They have the best pitches. Sometimes they only have 1 or 2 really good pitches, but it's so good that batters can't hit it. So that's your number 1 guy. And then the next on the going down from high leverage to low, so high to low leverage, setup guy or setup man, he's your 8th inning guy. So he's almost as good as the closer, but not quite. So either he's younger and he's like on his way to becoming a closer, or he's older and used to be a closer and now he's okay with the 8th, or he's just as good as a closer and you're just a rich team and you pay for 2 guys that are that good. There's lots of ways to approach it, but he's basically your second best guy, 8th inning, and he's second best guy in the bullpen. And then after him, you would have a left-handed specialist, or 2 even. Sometimes you have 2 specialists. This is a left-handed pitcher who can get lefties out. I think I've mentioned this in some other videos, but in baseball, your handedness, or what hand you pitch, catch, or throw, or hit with, is a big deal, because pitchers who are the same handedness as the batter have an advantage. And a batter has an advantage over a pitcher who is opposite-handed. And there's lots of caveats, but so your next guy that's important would be a left-handed specialist. A left-handed pitcher who pitches to left-handed batters, or righties who aren't good against lefties, or switch hitters that aren't as good against lefties. By the way, I don't think I mentioned that before, but batters are either lefty, righty, or switch, and switch hitters bat both ways because of this handedness thing. So yeah, the next guy you would have is a left-handed specialist. And then sometimes you have a second lefty, or a righty with a different look, or slot. So, sometimes a lot of teams will have 2 lefties because guys can't go multiple days in a row. So because of arm fatigue. So, if you have another game, you need another lefty, there you go. Or sometimes you just have in this slot a good right-handed reliever who can throw from like underhanded, or not underhanded, but like sidearm, or maybe has a funky delivery to throw batters' timing off, because hitting is all about timing. So pitching is about disrupting the timing and also deception of like how pitches move and what do they look like and all that. So if you have a pitcher that has a funky delivery, they could go here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 guys. And then sometimes a righty who can only get right-handed batters out, or, medium leverage guy if you're using the other way of thinking about it. And then also very important is multi-inning guys. So yeah, multi-inning guys are also important, like I said, to help prevent pitcher injury and approach games in a different way. But it's really helpful to have guys that can go, 2 to 3 innings every few days. And sometimes you'll have like, especially if you have a really good starter, so the starter can go, 7 innings, and then this guy can go, multi-inning guy can do 2, and that's your whole game. And you give everyone in the bullpen rest. Or like sometimes the broadcast will call it the bullpen budget. And it's like, okay, so yesterday your pitchers, let's just say, Frank, Tom, and Harry all pitched. So they are unavailable today because usually bullpen pitchers don't pitch back-to-back days. Sometimes they do. But so then those guys are unavailable. So you have to go to other guys. So having a guy like this to get through multiple innings and possibly just, have it be 2 pitchers that day are very helpful for the long 162 game season. And then after this guy, you have an innings eater. And it is what it sounds like. It's not very flattering. It's a pitcher who's, not very good or is okay, but their main function is to eat innings. You put them in and they go multiple innings. On days where you're in the 2nd inning and you're already losing by 9, this guy would go in as soon as possible to kind of help you get through the game, or like save that starter for a future start. That's not always how it would work, but it's basically, it would be a guy that is like the multi-inning guy, but this first guy would be good, very good sometimes. And the innings eater is not as good, and basically his function is to eat innings. And then the last guy in the bullpen, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the 8th guy is like a young buck or reclamation project. So that's the worst penmanship I've ever had, and you can't even see it. But the 8th and final spot is often a young pitcher that you call up, giving them a chance, or you have a pitcher who was injured last year and you want to ease them back into things, and so you don't give them a big role at first. Or sometimes, you have a former starter that you acquired in the offseason and you want them to become a reliever. So that's called like a reclamation project, where you are trying to change their career. So this is a very loose way of thinking about the bullpen, but leverage is more modern and people think of it that way. And, sometimes starters go to the bullpen if they're not pitching particularly well, or maybe the team makes a trade mid-season and has a new guy come in and replace you, but they want to keep you for the bullpen. Or in the postseason, you can kind of get through short series with 3 to 4 starters, so the other remaining starters might go to the bullpen for that series and replace some of your not as good bullpen pitchers. Okay, so that is the pitching staff construction, bullpen and starters and openers and all those caveats. We'll talk about the lineup next. And I'll put timestamps in case this is really boring to people. But after that, we'll get to some substitution rules, and then simple plays on offense, simple plays on defense. And then I'll just go through a bunch of rules and define them for you, just so you have an idea of kind of the confines of the game. Obviously, there are so many rules. If you've ever watched any sport, there's lots of little variations and sub rules, and there's no way I could do them all in one video, but I will give you the general idea. After the first video gave you the very basics, this is, I guess, basics plus. So that was the bullpen. Now we'll do the lineup. So these are the batters, and they're the same guys who play defense, except for the DH and the pitcher, which I've explained before, but just as a catch-up, if you don't know, the pitcher these days only pitches and plays defense. He does not hit. And in his place, there's a designated hitter who only hits for the pitcher and does not play defense. So together, the pitcher and the DH make one full player. This was done because pitchers over the years had got worse at hitting and became more specialized and were only focused on pitching. So rather than watch pitchers hit very poorly, every team now has a DH as of a few years ago. So there's more offense and players can specialize more. So yeah, there's many ways to approach a lineup. This time, as opposed to how I explain pitching staffs, I'll go through the traditional way of building a lineup, and then I'll go through the more modern way. And of course, with the caveat that there are many ways to make a team. But your first hitter is your leadoff guy, and he has a high OBP. So that's on-base percentage. That means hits and walks, and then also hits by pitches. But they get on base a lot. So it doesn't matter how they get on base, but they get on base. And they're usually fast, and they can steal. So that's steal, sorry about that. But so they get on base, and once they're on base, they're able to steal second, or on a hit, go from first past second to third base. So they are kind of prime the offense to score runs. And then your second hitter would be like a patient hitter. So Derek Jeter was a number 2 hitter for most of his career, if not all. I don't really remember, even though I'm a Yankees fan. They allow the leadoff hitter to steal if need be, so they can read the situation very well and let the leadoff hitter steal if need be. But they can, if the leadoff hitter gets out or is called out on an attempted steal, they can also be like a second leadoff, and they can prime the offense themselves if need be, because they're a good enough hitter. And then usually the best hitter is number 3 in the lineup. It depends on a lot of things. Depends on handedness and skills and tool sets, but your best hitter is usually 3rd. And then the 4th hitter is the cleanup hitter, 2nd best hitter usually. And again, it depends on handedness, because I'll pause here just to explain. Like I said, handedness matters a lot in what kind of advantage either the pitcher or the batter has. So if you have all righties in your lineup, then the opposing team can just have a righty pitch, and it's harder for them. But if you go, most teams will alternate handedness, so like lefty, righty, lefty, righty, etc., or throw in some switch hitters there. So alternating makes it harder for the pitcher, because they have to think more about how to get batters out, because they get a lefty out differently than a righty. They use different pitches, they use different pitch mixes and sequencing and all sorts of things. So some guys can't get righties out or lefties out, whatever. So by having a balanced lineup, it's called balance when you switch and you have equal amounts of lefty and righty and switch. If you have a balanced lineup, it's a lot harder for the pitcher to get everybody out easily. So, it depends on a lot of these factors, but typically you're in the old way of approaching lineup construction, your second best hitter would be fourth. And then your fifth hitter would be a power bat. And their number one goal is to drive in runs. So that's RBIs, runs batted in. That's their number one goal. And then six would be like an on-base type again, or a home run hitter only. So they have as you go down the lineup, you have better hitters up top, and you kind of have worse hitters down at the bottom. So this guy may only be good at getting on base or hitting home runs or line drives. They may only have one good thing that they're good at, but they're very good at it. So they would go here in the middle. And then seventh is like a contact hitter or line drive hitter. And they would, again, only have one tool, as it's called, one thing they're good at. And then this is like your second worst hitter, and then your worst hitter, typically. But sometimes, oddly enough, you could switch these, again, depending on handedness, but also sometimes teams would prefer to have a better hitter at 9 than 8, because when you get to the bottom, if the inning is still going, you go back to the top. So, you could have an inning go 8-9-1, or your 3 batters up. So it kind of does matter if you're going into your best hitters. Maybe you want to have a better hitter at the bottom than an 8 hitter, or having your worst hitter at the bottom, because they turn the lineup over back to 1. So sometimes you'll have like a young guy at 9 who is a future leadoff hitter, but he's not ready to have the pressure of being the leadoff hitter, so he would go here. So this is also sometimes considered second leadoff because of the turnover of the lineup. So that's a very oversimplified and kind of outdated approach. A more modern idea is just put your best hitters up top, and that's because statistical analysis says the top hitters get more at-bats per game and over the course of the season, so why not have your best hitters take the most at-bats? And there's some merit to that theory. Like the Philadelphia Phillies have some of their good hitters, like Kyle Schwarber is the leadoff hitter, but he's not a high on-base guy. He's not fast. He can't steal, but he hits home runs. He's a good slugger. And sometimes he starts a game with a solo home run, and immediately you're up 1-0 and the pitcher's on his back foot. So it's a psychological thing too. But basically the more modern approach to this idea is just put your best hitters up top and the rest will sort itself out, which has kind of been disproven in recent years because you can't just do 100% statistical analysis and whatever the computers say is what you should do, because this is a game played by humans and people do things and react, and clutch and pressure are things that computers still can't measure but are real if you ever talk to athletes or played a sport yourself. Some people are able to perform in high leverage moments and some aren't, and starting a game off is its own kind of pressure. So all sorts of different things are factored in when they're making a lineup, but that's kind of the approach to making your lineup. I didn't prepare like a defensive approach, but infielders are typically more agile because they have to dive for balls, and outfielders typically are either faster so they can cover more ground running in the outfield, or they have a good arm so they can get the ball in really quick, or depending how good they are, they might have both tools or multiple tools. But your worst defender is often at first base. Your catcher is the most important on defense because they are basically like the quarterback. They are calling the pitches for most pitchers. So they have to know the opposing team's hitters very well so they can call the game for the pitcher. So the catcher is like the most important, and that's why many catchers go on to manage, become coaches after they retire. But yeah, third base has a lot of third base has a lot of, they call it the hot glove or the hot stove. No, hot glove, or no, hot corner. Third base is called the hot corner because right-handed batters, as most batters are, hit the ball to the left-hand side most often. And if it's coming down the line at third base, it's very fast, usually. But yeah, that's like a basic defensive overview, but we'll get to substitutions and then get into some plays that are run. I mean, plays in air quotes, because, it's not like football, American football or basketball, where actual people move and have assignments. It's, usually, I guess there are assignments, but it's very, a lot more simple, more simplified. So substitutions is what we'll talk about next. Substitutions. So like soccer or football, if you call it that, if a player comes out of the game, they can't go back in, unlike hockey or basketball or American football. So because of that, pitchers, when they come out, it requires a mound visit. So basically the manager comes out, and you're allowed one per inning without taking the pitcher out. And then the second any further mound visits, you have to remove the pitcher. So a mound visit is when the manager comes out of the dugout, comes out to the mound where the pitcher plays, and talks to the pitcher. Teams get 4 mound visits per game. Unless you have used them all by the 8th inning, then you get +1 in the 9th. If 0. And then +1 for every extra inning. So in the 10th, the 11th, 10 plus innings, you get an extra mound visit per inning. So, you have to use them wisely. And the exceptions are injury, offensive substitution, or like weather-related things. If someone gets hurt or the offense makes a substitution, you can go out to the mound, and it doesn't count as a mound visit. But if you come out just regularly, more than once in an inning, you have to take the pitcher out, and the manager will signal to the bullpen like this, and then he'll do like righty for right-handed or lefty for left-handed. But typically the bullpen coach will have already talked to the manager via a phone, a landline that connects the bullpen to the dugout, because they get pitchers up to warm up. So whoever's warming up is usually coming in anyway. So they already know. But the signaling is like an old thing from back in the day before phones. So yeah, that's mound visits, and that's how pitchers are substituted. After the starter or opener is done, the manager will come out and take them out, and then a reliever will come in from the bullpen. Similarly, for offensive players, and defense position players, they just get subbed out whenever. So if you're up to bat, so pinch hitting, if you're up to bat and you're the 2-hitter and it's late in the game, but you've had a bad game, or say you're the 9-hitter and you haven't got a hit and they want to replace you for whatever reason, it's called a pinch hitter. And they come in and hit in a pinch. So you, when you have your lineup, you're starting 9, because you have 26 players and a 13-player max for pitchers. 9 plus 13 is 22, which usually leaves you with 4 bench players. I forgot to mention, sorry. So your 4 bench players are 4 position players, non-pitchers. So those guys don't start the game. And they typically, you will have, it really depends, but you'll have 1 catcher. You'll have a utility guy who can play multiple positions at defense, and then usually like a slugger or like a okay hitter, but he's not good enough to start, and then a speed guy when you need a stolen base in the game. So if you substitute in a position player to hit for someone, they're called a pinch hitter. If you bring them in to run for someone, they're a pinch runner to try and steal a base. Or, late, if you're down a run and you have someone on first who's very slow, you would bring in a pinch runner regardless of whether they're going to steal or not. And then catchers sometimes, because they're so important defensively, most catchers aren't very good at hitting. So late in the game, if they're up, you would often bring in a different hitter for them, for the starting catcher, and then the backup catcher would go in to finish the game. So you would use up 2 of your bench guys there. So that's kind of how, and then of course you have defensive substitution, which is when a player will come in to play defense for a starter or another player who has been substituted in. Obviously, when their turn in the batting order comes up, they will hit, but their primary reason for coming in is because they're better at defense than a starter or some other player. So those are the kinds of substitutions for position players. And now we'll go to some simple plays on offense, followed by some simple plays on defense. So, offensive plays. So the most common is a hit and run. So this is, I'll read from the rule book for you. It's a high-risk, high-reward offensive strategy used in baseball where the runner tries to steal, usually second base, and the batter swings at almost any pitch, if only to distract the catcher. If the batter makes contact, the runner has a greater chance of reaching the next base. If the batter gets a base hit, the runner will likely be able to take an extra base. If the batter fails to hit the ball, the hit and run becomes a pure steal. So the runner takes off, and the batter hits. Basically, he swings at any pitch. Now the reverse, or the alternative version, is a run and hit. The base runner attempts to advance when the pitcher commits to home plate, so when the pitcher delivers the ball no matter what. And the batter either swings or doesn't, they are able to judge whether or not to. And if the batter feels like that he shouldn't swing and thinks the base runner will steal successfully, he does not swing to save him a strike, essentially. So it's similar, but it's harder to do, so less common. The next, I don't know if I explained what a bunt is, but basically it's a non-swing. So instead of swinging, the batter will put the bat, hold the bat parallel to the pitcher and basically catch the ball with the bat is how it's taught. But it's like a very soft hit into the ground. So it's not a competitive play. It's not a real swing. The whole point is that you are sacrificing yourself. You are trading your ability to hit to advance a runner or score a runner. So basically, I can show you here. Instead of swinging, you would just bunt and you put the ball down and it bounces in the infield. And you make the defense field the ball. And if it's even a half-decent bunt, it will be a lot harder to make a play at home plate than it would be to just throw out the batter at first. So if it's a bad bunt, then they can throw out the runner at third, which is typically when you try to bunt, is when you have a runner at third and you're just trading an out for a run, because they're 90 feet away, as opposed to if you're on first, you're so much further. So that's a suicide sacrifice. And fast players can also try to bunt for a hit, but typically it's not for a hit. It's for a run or for advancing the runners. You can try to bunt for a hit, but you have to be fast to do it. Usually it's a sacrifice or sack bunt, because you're sacrificing your ability or your opportunity to hit in order to advance a runner or score a run or both. And there's different kinds of bunt plays. Suicide squeeze. You'll have to pardon the name, so hopefully it doesn't bother you. I don't think there's another name for it. And a suicide squeeze, it's a sack bunt with the runner on third. So runner on third base. And the base runner takes off as soon as the pitcher starts his windup. And the batter bunts the ball expecting to be thrown out at first, but it gives the runner enough time to get home. Again, like I was just saying, if it's even a half decent bunt, it'll be a lot harder to get the runner out at home. Now there's a safety squeeze too, which is sort of like a half version of this. It's the same thing as a suicide squeeze, but runner only goes after the batter makes contact. Well, that says bunt, but whatever, you know what I mean. So after contact is made. There's also a double steal. So you know what a steal is when a player, a base runner, tries to advance without a play being made, a hit or a walk. So they try to steal the base. A double steal is when two players attempt to steal. It's usually players on first and second base, but not always. Sometimes it could be, second and third, and the third base runner is trying to steal home. If you have a runner on first and third, you send them both and hope that the defense will try to get the batter stealing second out, because it's a longer throw from home to second and then back if they're trying to get the runner at third going home. So I guess you would send the runner on first, and then if the catcher throws to second, then the third base runner takes off and tries to steal home while the ball is in the air, because it has to go further and then it has to come further again to come back. So that would be that. And then there's also a delayed steal, which is when the base runner pretends like he's not going to steal and then breaks for the next base later, like after the pitch has crossed home plate. But it doesn't really work at the major league level, so I'm not even going to really include it here. And then there are simple plays on defense. So I'll just erase these. Defensive plays. So these are mostly based on the pitcher, because on defense, in between pitches, it's not really a dead ball. Like base runners can try to steal bags, so the game is still going on, but the defense can't really do anything to try to get outs or anything other than like what's called ball in hand, I think, is where like a trick play where like the defender hides the ball and the base runner forgets where it is and then they get tagged out. But that's like a little league play. So most of the ones at the major league level are initiated or involve the pitcher. So a pickoff is when the pitcher will, instead of throwing a pitch home, they throw it to a base where a base runner is to try to get the runner out. Now, this happens because most batters take leads. So almost every base runner, batter turns into a base runner. Almost every base runner takes a lead, which means they do not stand on the base as the pitcher prepares to pitch. They stand a few feet off, and really fast guys will stand even further off because of their speed. They know they can get back safely before they're tagged out. So every base runner takes a lead from the base. And so instead of pitching home, the pitcher will throw to the base where the base runner is, either to try to get them before they're able to dive back safely to the base, or by disrupting their timing to steal the base if the pitcher thinks they're going to steal. So let's say here you have a runner here at first. The pitcher will throw over if they think he's going to steal second. So then if the runner goes to second, the first baseman will get it right as he's breaking and will be able to throw it to second and get him out. Or more likely, will get the runner in what's called a rundown. Or colloquially, it's called a pickle. So that's when a runner is caught in between two bases because he was trying to steal and they picked him off, but they haven't tagged him out yet. So it's still a live play. So the runner will go back and forth between his former base and his attempted steal base, and the defense will try to tag him out, and you'll see defensive players cycle in and out, running toward the batter and then throwing to another guy if he reverses course and he goes back and forth. And there's a set protocol on how you approach rundowns successfully for the defensive team, but you should to be able to get them out. It's like if you don't get someone out in a rundown, it's kind of a big problem for the defense. You should be able to get every single rundown runner, or almost every, 99 times out of 100. So the pickoff is when you throw to a base instead of home. And I will also add that left-handed pitchers have a huge, well, maybe not huge, but huge advantage because when they are facing, or when they're getting ready to pitch home, their body faces first base, and a right-hander will face third base. So because second base is the most often stolen base, because the left-hander faces first, they're able to pick off a runner on first much more easily because they're already turned that way. So like Andy Pettitte was a Yankee pitcher who had a very good pickoff move because he already faced left-handed, he already faced first base. Although it will, his pickoff move as a pitcher was, sometimes people thought it was a balk, which I was going to do this later, but I'll do it now. A balk is, let me look up the technical term for it here, just so that you know. A balk occurs when a pitcher makes an illegal motion on the mound that the umpire deems to be deceitful to the runners. As a result, any men on base are awarded the next base and the pitch is called a dead ball. So it's up to the ump, and the home plate umpire usually. But I guess for any ump can call a balk, but it's basically the pitcher has to go home with the ball. He has to throw home when he pitches, or pick off at a base. But if he starts home and then throws to a base, that's a balk because it's deceitful. So you have to, wherever your windup starts, you have to end going that same way, essentially. And then there are other minutia rules that I don't really know, but a balk will result in a runners moving up, and it can result in runs being scored, and it's a dead play. I don't believe the batter goes to first. So that's, a left-handed pitcher has a major advantage in a pickoff, but also sometimes they ride the line of a balk because they are so close. Their delivery to home and first can look the same. But so I just wanted to mention that there. Now, similarly, you can throw behind. This is when you have a base runner, and say you have a base runner on first, and instead of the pitcher throwing over before the pitch, the pitcher will pitch the ball to the catcher, and if it's not put in play by the batter or is just taken and not even swung at, the catcher will then throw behind the runner. So if the runner's on first, they throw to first base, trying to catch the runner off guard. Say the runner wasn't really paying attention, or just to kind of keep them honest. to keep them second guessing from stealing second. It's sometimes used for catchers with weak arms. Like one of the Yankees catchers last year in the past few years doesn't have a good arm, and people were stealing a lot of bases on him. So if you want to use our little, here, I'll just do another diamond here. So the catcher's here. If you have a base runner here, this distance to second base is longer than any other base, third or first. So that's why second base is most often the most stolen base. So if you're a catcher and you don't have a strong arm, that extra distance makes it harder to throw out a base runner. So, the pitcher will pitch the ball and then the catcher throws behind to try to get this base runner off and catch them off guard and throw them out, tag them out, have the first baseman tag them out. Because not every player locks in 100% in between pitches, especially right after a pitch. Like if they take at first, right as the pitcher is, before the pitcher pitches, like I said, base runners have a lead, but then what's called a secondary lead is what they take a secondary lead while the pitcher is pitching. So here's the base. So here's the base, and here's the base runner. That's his lead, this distance. But then while the pitcher is pitching, he will take another few steps for the secondary lead. So he's even further away after the pitch. So if the pitch is swung at or taken, he's here now. And so this distance can be twice as far. And if he's not very fast or he's not very aware on the base paths, the catcher can throw over and try to get him out. So that's calling throwing behind the runner. It's typically to first, sometimes to third, depending, but like the angle is different because they're coming right at you. But yeah, it's usually at first base. Then you have the pitch out. This is an intentional ball with the idea that the catcher can stand and throw, usually to second base. So again, this is to assist with runners. A pitch out is where instead of throwing a strike, you will throw a pitch so far out of the strike zone that the batter will never basically swing at it. And then the catcher, if it's a good pitch out, it will go usually to their throwing arm, and it will be up high enough that the catcher can stand to receive it so they can quickly catch it and throw it to second base. And, like I said, the catcher calls the game, so he will call a pitch out if there's a really fast runner on first, and maybe he doesn't have a great arm. So this gives them the advantage of, because the catcher can stand, he can throw it harder, and they have the element of surprise because the base runner doesn't know this is coming. So that's another way to try to offset the run game. And then, of course, as you probably are aware, that's poorly written. Again, I don't have good penmanship, but a double play is when the defense tries to get 2 outs in one play. So typically it will be a ground ball in the infield that an infielder will field, throw to second base because there has to be a runner on. So then they will force out the runner at second because he has to go to second, and then throw to first for another force out. So they don't really have to be tagged. It's usually a force out because it's quicker to force out a runner than tag them. So the defense will try to get 2 outs. It's usually the outs are at second and first base. But it could be anywhere, and it can also be an outfielder catches the ball and a base runner went too far and left the base before the ball was caught. If you're on a base and there's a ball to the outfielder, you can't advance safely to the next base until the ball is caught, and that's called tagging up. You tag up on the bag, the outfielder catches it, and then at your own risk, you can advance to the next base or go home and score a run. But if you do not wait, and say you were doing a hit and run and you ran while the batter was swinging, and it went to the outfielder and you went past second base and the outfielder caught it over here and threw it back to first before you got back, that's a double play too. So it's mostly in the infield, but it can also involve the outfield. And then there's other variations too. But the last thing I'll cover here is a triple play, and this is very rare, but it's a play where you try to get all 3 outs in one play. Teams, I don't know, I didn't look up the research on this, but teams, if they have won a season, that's a big deal. They're pretty rare. Even more rare is the unassisted triple play where one player makes all 3 outs. So you would have to catch the ball, tag a base runner, and then throw it, and then tag another base runner, I guess, because it's unassisted. Yeah, so that's even crazier. But a triple play is you already have 2 base runners on, and you have to force out 2 of them, and then the guy coming to first from home, the batter going to first. Whereas the double play, you only have to have 1 runner on. You can have more, but, at least 1. So those are the defensive plays, as it were, and the offensive plays we did. And now I'll just go over some of the pertinent rules for the game. Starting with the more newer rules that the game put in place. So we'll start with the automatic runner. This is a newer rule, and this is also called the ghost runner, or sometimes the Manfred Man, which is a play on the band from the 70s. And it's because the commissioner, Rob Manfred, is the one who instituted this rule. This is a runner on second base to start every extra inning. Well, half inning. So if a game goes into extra innings, basically overtime for baseball, every half inning starts with a runner on second base to increase the likelihood of the game being over because, the runner is that much closer to home and closer to scoring. It's intended to shorten games, not only for fans, but also to help with wear and tear on players because, 20-inning games really hurt teams health-wise sometimes. So this is called a ghost runner because they did not earn their way to second base. They just start the inning there. And there are certain rules about it, like if he scores, it doesn't count as an earned run for the pitcher. It's an unearned run, which is different for how pitcher stats are calculated and like what matters to them. But some people really don't like this, but the ghost runner does help speed up the game, and it's the last guy who got out. So say the bottom of the 9th or the top of the 9th, the number 8 hitter got out. So the number 8 hitter in the top of the 10th would be the automatic or ghost runner. So it's whoever the last guy was up. So that's the automatic runner. It started during the pandemic in 2020 to help with health and safety, to quicken games, and then they just kept it because it helps with health and safety of the players in a different way. And so it's only for the regular season too. I'll add that. Regular season only. That's that one. So then I'll also go to the pitch clock. Now this was very controversial, but I happen to like it. It started in 2024, last season. And so there's 30 seconds between batters because sometimes players would take a while to come up to bat. And then there is 15 seconds with runners. 15 seconds with the bases empty and 20 with runners. So this is how long the pitcher has to deliver the pitch to home base, to home plate. And I think it's until they start their motion. The ball doesn't have to cross the plate. They just have to start their wind-up. So the 20 was reduced to 18 last season. So it's 15 and 18 as of 2025. So, yeah. And then the batter, with 8 seconds left on the pitch clock, the batter has to be in the box and attentive, aka looking at the pitcher. So like I was saying earlier, pitching or hitting is a lot about timing, And pitching is about disrupting timing. So there's a lot of cat and mouse games they play with each other psychologically to disrupt the other. And part of that is controlling the clock and waiting. And then there's also a limit on pickoffs per at-bat. 3 pickoffs per at-bat. If the runners advance, it resets. This should be at-bat. That's my bad. So you get 3 pickoffs per at-bat, and if you throw over and the guy is safe, and you throw over again and he's safe, on the third one, if you throw over and you don't get him, he automatically gets to go to second. So this is to encourage more base stealing and more offense. So you only get 3 pickoffs per at-bat. And then as far as the clock, sometimes there are exceptions made, like if a player is coming back to the stadium of a team where he used to play and is a beloved player, the umpire will turn the pitch clock off and just let him receive a big warm welcome, things like that. Or like, a career milestone for a pitcher or hitter, stuff like that. Next, I will do the infield fly rule, or attempt to explain it. This is one I'm never really sure about. It doesn't happen that often because, well, it might happen once or twice a game, but like rarely do people take advantage of it. I will just read from the rule book. An infield fly is any fair fly ball, not including a line drive or a bunt, which can be caught by an infielder with ordinary effort when first and second, or first, second, and third base are occupied before 2 men are out. The rule is in place to protect against a team allowing a shallow fly ball to drop with the intention of causing a force play at second and third, or second, third, and home. Otherwise, the team would be able to force out base runners who had stayed put on a routine fly ball. In these situations, the umpire will declare the infield fly rule for the benefit of the base runners as soon as it is apparent that the fly ball qualifies. The batter is out automatically, even if the ball is not caught. So if the defense drops it, they're out. And the base runners can advance at their own risk. If the ball is caught, the base runners can attempt to advance as they would on a typical ball caught in the air. So, basically to sum up, it prevents dropping a shallow fly in the infield. Infield. So, you could be smart and like, oh, it's a pop-up in the infield. I'll drop it and get the guy going to third to keep the runners further away from home and make it harder for them to score. So the infield fly rule is in place to prevent that, to make it more even for the offense. I hope I did that right, because real baseball heads are very particular about this rule. There's also replay and challenge. So this started, I don't know when, maybe 10, 15 years ago. Every team gets 2 per game. You can challenge certain plays and ask the umpires to review it via video. Well, actually, it's a video remote center in, I think, New Jersey that reviews it, not the umps on hand. Yeah. A manager, I'll read from the rule book again. A manager may challenge as many reviewable calls within a single play as he desires using one challenge. The club retains this challenge if the replay official overturns any challenged call, and loses its challenge if no calls are overturned. Once a club has exhausted its available manager challenges, it will no longer have the ability to challenge any other plays. After a play, managers must immediately hold up their hands to signal that they want to do this, that they're considering a challenge. Once they do, they have a 15-second timer that starts where team's own internal replay people will look at a play and determine whether they want to challenge. And then if they do, you can challenge safe or out on a base path or in the outfield. You can challenge fair foul. You can challenge home run or hit, like if the ball goes over the wall. But you cannot challenge balls and strikes. That is not yet challengeable. It may be in the future. So that's replay and challenge for the managers. And like I talked about earlier, was the official score. I was going to do that here, but it's just a person that's up in the press box, and they record the outcome of everything and have the official determination. Substitutions we went over. Oh, the 3-batter minimum. I think this rule is going to go away. So this is a rule where any relievers entering the game must face more than or equal to 3 batters. Now, this was done because up until maybe 10 years ago, a lot of relievers would be like, this is our left-handed specialist, but he can only get lefties out. So he would come in, he'd face a lefty, get him out, and then you'd bring in another guy. And with every pitching change, the game goes to commercial, and it's usually 1 or 2 minutes. So every time there's a pitching change, it adds time to the game. So this was an early attempt at shortening games or combating this problem, because some games, especially like Yankee Red Sox games back in the day that had a lot of offense, would go 4 or even sometimes 5 hours. That's just like really crazy for us Americans. I know some cricket fans will scoff, but so the 3-batter minimum was an early attempt to cut down on game time, but like this automatic runner and the pitch clock, and they also added bigger bases to make base running easier, and then also the pickoff rule. And the pitch clock did actually, it sucked out like I think 30 minutes of dead time per game. So instead of 3 hours, like the average was 2 and 35 after 1 year of this rule, a full year. So it did shorten games by 30 minutes, but because of that, being much more successful at making games shorter, and it didn't change the games that much. It sucked out all the dead time in between pitches and stuff like that isn't actual gameplay. It just made the games better and shorter. Whereas this actually changes the way the game is played while trying to shorten the game. And this was before that, and I think this will probably go away in the next 10 years. Or maybe it'll be a 2-batter minimum or a 1-batter minimum. There's a lot of talk about rule changes and stuff, and this isn't really high on the list. The next one will be like automatic balls and strikes, where you use cameras to call balls and strikes and computers rather than an umpire. It will be a system similar to tennis, where Eagle Eye or whatever Chase Review calls balls in or out and the lines instead of a line judge. It's similar to that. The exact way that it will be used is a subject of much debate, whether it's full automatic balls and strikes or ABS or robo-umps as it's called, or some kind of additional challenge system where the batter gets to challenge 1 pitch per at bat, or the manager gets to challenge X number of pitches per game. All of that will be discussed the next time the players and the teams have a negotiation for the contract between the players and teams. But so this 3-batter minimum will likely go away, I think, eventually. There's also warm-ups. We're getting to the end here. There's so many rules, but these are kind of just interesting things I find when I first started watching. At the beginning of any inning, pitchers are allowed to throw as many warm-ups as they want within the countdown. And it's 2 minutes per in between innings. And then, so it's as many as you want to throw. And then if the clock goes off and the pitcher's still pitching, the umpire will stop them. And sometimes older pitchers who are established get mad. But if there's an injury to a pitcher, the next guy that comes in gets unlimited time, because it's not fair to make them warm up too quick. It's unsafe for their arm as well. That's where we'll leave it for today. Because warming up is important. I do it before every video. That'll do it for this rules video. I hope you found it informative and fun. if you want to have more rules videos, I can go in depth on more. There's plenty of very specific rules for specific instances. There's a lot of rules. Or we can go into more roster construction or tactics. I feel like I did a good job, hopefully, doing most of the major ones, but there's definitely more to be discussed. Or we can discuss, like lineup building, team building from like the general manager point of view, and like money side of things and transactions, free agency, stuff like that, if that's interesting. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this, and thanks for stopping by. And like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. That helps the channel a lot. And of course, as always, I'm accepting video ideas if you like. Coming up next, I think I will have a coloring book video, something a little bit different, where I'll color a coloring book page about one specific player and give you some facts about that player while I do it. But I won't give away who the player is. Yeah, so thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.